When I opened our baby's photo album, I saw her face. My husband swapped out my pictures with photos of his mistress holding our child, in my hospital gown, in my bed, sipping from my mommy mug. He said, "You were unfit. She's more maternal." He tried to take full custody, but then I found the delivery room footage and, when I opened the baby's photo album that morning, I thought it would calm me down. Court was in 2 days. I needed something to remind me that I was a mother, no matter what his lawyer said. But when I flipped the first page, I froze. The photos weren't mine. In every single one, my husband's mistress, her, was cradling my newborn daughter. She was wearing my hospital gown, sitting in my bed, even sipping from the world's best mommy mug my sister had given me. I stared at her smile, wide and comfortable, as if she belonged there. My hands shook as I flipped faster. Every page was replaced. No trace of me, no sign I had even been in that hospital. It was like I'd been erased. When I confronted him that night, he didn't deny it. He actually laughed. "You were unfit," he said flatly, like it was a fact he'd memorized. "She's more maternal than you'll ever be." My breath caught in my chest. "You mean Claire, the woman you cheated on me with while I was in labor?" He shrugged. "You were a mess. I had to think about what was best for Lily." Claire stepped up. "You didn't." I didn't say anything. I just stood there, looking at the man I had been married to for 5 years, realizing he had rewritten reality to make me look like I'd never even existed. He told me he was filing for full custody, that I was unstable, delusional, dangerous. His lawyer's petition claimed I'd refused to bond with the baby, that I'd left the hospital without permission and showed no maternal instincts. It was all lies. But the worst part was he had evidence. Photos, witness statements from nurses who'd been coached, messages I'd supposedly sent. I remember thinking, how do you fight someone who's already rewritten your story? That night I went through everything: texts, old photos, emails. I tried to find anything that could prove I wasn't crazy. And then, in a forgotten corner of my Google Drive, I found something labeled Delivery Room Footage Backup. It was from the security camera the hospital used for liability documentation, something patients never even saw. I clicked play. The screen showed me on the bed, exhausted but smiling, cradling my baby. The nurse handed my daughter to my husband. He turned toward the camera, and then something happened that made my stomach drop so fast I thought I'd throw up. He walked out of frame, carrying our daughter, and a few minutes later Claire walked in. Still in street clothes, still wearing makeup. And then the nurse helped her into my gown. She took my place. And when she smiled down at my baby, my husband stood behind her, hand on her shoulder, like she had just given birth. I stopped the video there, my hands trembling, my whole world shattering all over again. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just betrayal. This was erasure. And I was going to make him regret it. Before all of this, before I ever learned what kind of man he really was, I thought I had the perfect life. My name's Hannah, and I met Ethan when I was 26, working as a nurse in Indianapolis. He was a financial advisor, older by 4 years, charming in that quiet, well-put-together way that made people feel safe around him. That was his power. He could make you trust him instantly. We met when I was assigned to his father's post-op care. Ethan visited every day. He brought his dad homemade soup, joked with the staff, remembered everyone's names. He was kind, attentive, and when his father was discharged, he asked me out. It felt natural, easy, like I was stepping into the life I'd always wanted. We married 2 years later. It was a small wedding, simple, classy, exactly how I wanted it. My sister was my maid of honor. His best friend Mark was the best man. We moved into a quiet cul-de-sac in Carmel, just outside the city. The kind of neighborhood where people wave when you drive by and decorate for every holiday. The first year was good. We were a team. He'd make coffee every morning, I'd leave him notes in his lunch. We talked about kids constantly, about building something solid. But when we started trying, things got tense. My first pregnancy ended in a miscarriage at 10 weeks. I was shattered, but Ethan was distant. He didn't comfort me. He told me, "Maybe it's your body's way of saying you're not ready." That sentence stuck in my chest like a splinter. The next year we tried again, and it worked. I was terrified and hopeful all at once. But something had changed in him. He stopped going to doctor appointments. He stopped talking about baby names. He started staying late at work. I asked him once if he was seeing someone, and he acted insulted, told me I was hormonal and paranoid. Around my 7th month, a woman started showing up at his office events. Claire. She was an assistant at another firm, but she always seemed to be near him. She was polished, flawless hair, soft voice, always smiling too much. I remember the first time I met her, at a company party. She handed me a glass of sparkling water and said, "You must be so tired carrying all that." She said it like she was already talking to him, not me, like I was a temporary inconvenience. I brushed it off at first. I wanted to believe I was just being insecure. I was huge, swollen, and emotional. But then Ethan started deleting texts, keeping his phone face down. He came home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. The night before I went into labor, we fought. Not screaming, just cold, sharp words. I told him I felt alone. He said I was too emotional to be a mother, that I needed to get myself under control. I gave birth alone. He claimed he was stuck in traffic, but showed up right after Lily was born, sweaty and smiling, with Claire behind him holding flowers. I thought it was odd, but I was too exhausted to question it. When the nurse took a photo of us, me, Ethan, and the baby, I remember feeling like everything would be okay now. Like the hard part was over. I didn't know that was the moment he started replacing me. That he'd already found a way to make me disappear, one piece of proof at a time. After the birth, everything blurred. The first month at home should have been filled with exhaustion and joy, but instead, it felt like I was living in someone else's house. Ethan acted like a stranger, detached, condescending, always finding ways to correct me. If Lily cried too long, he'd sigh and take her from me. "She needs calm energy," he'd say, implying I didn't have it. When she wouldn't latch, he told me I was doing it wrong. I remember crying quietly in the bathroom while he and Claire, yes, Claire, stood in the kitchen whispering over bottles and formula. At first, Claire's visits made sense. She was helping, that's how Ethan explained it. She's been through this before, her sister has twins, she's just offering support. But she started showing up every day, then staying late, then holding Lily longer than I did. I started keeping track. The day she first rocked Lily to sleep before I could. The day Ethan took a photo of her instead of me. The day he told me to take a nap, and when I woke up, Claire was wearing my robe, sitting in my recliner, bottle-feeding my baby. I told Ethan she needed to leave. He laughed and said I was being territorial. He actually used that word. By week 6, he'd convinced my doctor to prescribe antidepressants, told him I was having mood swings. I wasn't. I was just exhausted and confused. But the medication made me foggy, forgetful. There are whole afternoons I can't remember clearly. I began to feel like the walls were closing in, like every move I made was being watched. One night while Ethan was asleep, I went through his phone again. He'd changed the password, but his laptop was open in the office. His email was synced. That's when I saw it, folders labeled custody docs, evidence, support statements. Inside were drafted emails to his lawyer describing me as unstable postpartum, unattached, dangerous. He was preparing to take Lily away. I remember scrolling through the attached files, my body shaking so badly I had to hold onto the desk. There were screenshots of texts that looked like I'd sent them, messages saying things like, "I can't stand this baby," or "Sometimes I wish she never existed." None of them were real. The timestamps didn't even match my phone records, but he'd faked them perfectly. I realized then, this wasn't spontaneous cruelty, it was premeditated. He was building a case, methodically, carefully, like he'd studied every step. I confronted him the next morning, shaking and furious, but he didn't even deny it. He smiled, actually smiled. "You're not well, Hannah," he said softly. "You're imagining things. I'm documenting this for your own good." He told me to rest. Then he took Lily and left for a drive. I sat there for hours, staring at the empty bassinet, trying not to lose it completely. When he came back, he handed me a photo, Lily asleep in Claire's arms, both of them smiling. He said, "Look how peaceful she is with someone stable." That was when something inside me broke. From that day forward, I stopped fighting him directly. I acted quiet, agreeable. I pretended the pills were working. I let him think I was slipping deeper into the fog he'd created. But I was collecting everything. Recording conversations, taking photos, saving call logs, because if Ethan wanted a war, I'd make sure he never saw the end of it coming. 2 months later, I came home from a doctor's appointment to find the front door unlocked. The living room was spotless, eerily so. Lily's toys were gone from the floor, the diaper bag was missing. The nursery was empty, every drawer, every blanket, every photo of me with her gone. I called Ethan, straight to voicemail. I called again and again until finally he answered, calm as ever. "Hannah," he said, "we're staying with Claire for a while." My throat went dry. "We, Lily and me," he said. "It's better this way, you need help. Time to get well." I remember gripping the counter so hard my hand cramped. "You can't take her from me." His voice was detached, almost rehearsed. "You'll see her when the court says it's appropriate. You've been erratic. Even your doctor agrees you're not stable right now." I didn't even know what he meant until later that week, when a police officer came to the door with a restraining order. It said I'd threatened Ethan and the baby, that I'd thrown things, that I'd been violent, all lies. But the affidavit had a signature from my doctor and even an incident report, complete with a statement supposedly written by me during a mental episode. It looked like my handwriting. It wasn't, I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was watching my own life being deleted piece by piece. 2 days later, the custody hearing started. Ethan came in holding Lily, dressed like the perfect father. Claire sat behind him, smiling like she belonged there. When it was my turn to speak, his lawyer objected to everything I said, calling it delusional. Then he presented evidence. Photos of me looking exhausted, red-eyed, supposedly passed out next to the crib. Voice recordings of me crying, cut and edited to sound unhinged. Even a note I'd written after my miscarriage, something private, raw, about feeling like I'd failed my baby. They used that as proof I had a pattern of instability. I looked at Ethan the entire time. He never once looked back. The judge granted him temporary full custody. I was allowed supervised visits pending further evaluation. After the hearing, as we walked out, Claire had the audacity to touch my shoulder and whisper, "We'll take good care of her." I slapped her hand away and said, "She's my daughter." She smirked. "Not anymore." That night, I went back through the cloud backup one more time, the one with the delivery room footage I'd forgotten about. Something about those fake photos had been eating at me. The lighting, the angles, it didn't add up. When I watched the video again, I saw something I'd missed the first time. After Ethan carried Lily out and Claire walked in, the nurse looked confused, like she hesitated. Then Ethan handed her an envelope. The nurse nodded and quietly closed the curtain. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just staged for the camera. They paid people. Ethan and Claire didn't just cheat. They replaced me. Every piece of evidence he used in court was part of that plan. The fake photos, the altered records, even my doctor's signature, it all connected. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't unstable. I was being systematically erased. And that's when I stopped thinking like a wife and started thinking like a witness. Because Ethan thought he'd built an airtight case, but he didn't know what I had just found on that hospital footage. Something that would destroy everything. I didn't sleep for 2 days after that. I just sat in front of my laptop replaying that delivery room footage frame by frame, writing down timestamps, names on badges, faces of every nurse and tech who appeared. I took screenshots, enhanced the stills, made copies and backups on multiple drives, because if Ethan had taught me anything, it was that paper trails can be rewritten, but video doesn't lie. I knew the hospital's policy. Cameras in the maternity wing were for liability documentation only, and recordings were supposed to be stored for 5 years. That meant there were official copies somewhere. If I could get access to those, I could prove everything: the envelope, the switch, the conspiracy. So I called the hospital pretending to be gathering documents for an insurance claim. The receptionist transferred me to risk management. When I said I needed the archived footage from the day of Lily's birth, the man on the phone hesitated. "I'm sorry," he said, "that file's been restricted. Only authorized parties can request it." I knew what that meant. Ethan had already been there. That same night, I went to the house we used to share. The lights were off. His car was gone. I parked down the street and crept around back. The patio curtains were open, and I could see into the living room, Claire holding Lily, cooing softly, while Ethan typed something on his laptop. The way they looked so comfortable made my skin crawl. Like they'd been playing house for months while I was still bleeding and broken from childbirth. I took photos through the window. Time-stamped. Proof that Lily was in that house, not with a temporary guardian like his lawyer claimed. When I got back to my apartment, I called my sister, Maya. She was the only one who believed me from the beginning. I told her everything about the footage, the forged documents, the judge, the hospital. Her voice was tight with rage. He's not just trying to take your kid, Hannah. He's trying to erase your existence. That's when I told her my plan. Step 1, get the original hospital footage through a back channel. Maya's friend worked in IT at the hospital. If she could pull the archived footage quietly, we'd have evidence that couldn't be disputed. Step 2, record everything. Every call, every message, every interaction. No more emotional outbursts, no confrontations. I'd act exactly the way Ethan described me, quiet, medicated, compliant, while I built a case under his nose. Step 3, track down that nurse from the delivery video. If I could find her, maybe she'd talk. Maybe she'd admit what the envelope was for. It took 3 weeks to locate her. Her name was Janelle Kay. She'd transferred to a clinic in Bloomington. I called pretending to be a former patient, wanting to thank her for her kindness. When we finally met in person, she looked guilty the moment she saw me. She denied knowing anything at first, but when I showed her the still frame of Ethan handing her the envelope, her face went white. She whispered, "He said it was for confidentiality. He said you didn't want to be recorded." I asked what was in the envelope. She didn't answer, just said, "I needed the money." I left that meeting shaking with rage, but also clear-headed for the first time in months. It wasn't just Ethan, it was a whole system of people who had helped him rewrite reality. I spent the next 2 weeks documenting everything. I copied the video onto encrypted drives. I printed screenshots. I even hid a USB stick inside Lily's old stuffed giraffe, just in case. When Ethan texted me to discuss visitation, I agreed immediately. I wanted him to think I was giving up, but I wasn't going to fight him in court anymore. I was going to take him down in a way he'd never see coming, using the same weapons he'd used on me: documentation, evidence, and exposure. And right when I thought I was ready to move, I found something on one of his old backup drives that made everything even darker than I could have imagined. Something that proved he didn't just manipulate people. He planned this years before Lily was even born. It was almost 2 a.m. when I found it. I'd been combing through one of Ethan's old backup drives that I'd cloned months earlier when we still lived together. Most of the files were dull, tax forms, spreadsheets, archived emails, but then I saw a folder labeled H Project. At first I thought it was work-related, but when I opened it, my stomach turned. Inside were dozens of subfolders, each one dated months apart, starting long before I'd even gotten pregnant. The earliest one, Phase 1, Selection, I clicked it. There were photos of women, dozens. Screenshots from social media, cropped profile pictures, work badges, even a few hospital staff photos. Next to each name was a note: age, career stability, family support, emotional profile. Next folder, Phase 2. Target, it had my name, my resume, a scan of my nursing license, a photo of me in my scrubs from the hospital's staff page. The notes beside it said, "High empathy, history of family trauma, seeks approval. Low confrontation threshold, good optics for victim narrative." I just stared at the screen, the blood roaring in my ears. He hadn't just met me by chance while visiting his father. He had chosen me. This wasn't coincidence. It was orchestration. I opened the next folder, Phase 3, Integration. There were photos from our first dates, screenshots of our messages, even transcripts of phone calls. He'd kept everything like case files. There were notes about how I responded to stress, how I forgave easily, how I tended to isolate after conflict. And then the final folder, Phase 4, Replacement. That one made me drop my coffee. Inside were documents outlining custody strategies, forged medical forms, even a draft of the same court motion his lawyer later filed. There were references to Claire before I even knew she existed. Under a note titled Transition, he'd written, "Objective, shift perception of maternal figure from H to C within 6 months postpartum. Establish instability narrative early. Secure sympathetic testimony from medical and family sources." It wasn't an affair. It was a project. He'd planned to take a wife who looked perfect on paper, stable job, good reputation, no criminal history, and then dismantle her credibility piece by piece until no one believed her. And Claire wasn't random either. I found her file too. She'd been one of the alternates in Phase 1. Notes on her said, "Manipulable, performs maternal effect convincingly. Will comply with guidance if emotionally validated." He'd tested both of us, picked me for stability, her for compliance. And when Lily was born, he executed the plan. That's why he filmed everything. That's why he staged the photos. Why he got the doctor, the nurse, and the lawyer involved. He wasn't just trying to erase me. He was documenting an experiment. When I scrolled to the bottom of the last file, I found a single document titled Exit Strategy. It said, once custody secured and maternal figure discredited, transfer assets. Relocate. Repeat within 5 years. Document new iteration for publication. Publication. He'd written that he was compiling a case study on emotional manipulation and maternal displacement. He was planning to publish it under a pseudonym. This wasn't just personal, it was systematic. And that's when I realized the reason he was so confident, so calm during court, so untouchable was because he thought of me as data. Not a wife, not a mother, not even a person. I sat there shaking, reading his words over and over, until one thought cut through everything else like glass. He wanted me gone, erased, labeled unstable, because the story only works if the subject disappears. But I wasn't disappearing. I was about to become the one variable he couldn't control. When I finally pieced it together, the horror didn't come from what Ethan did, it came from why he did it. I spent days digging into his past, retracing every detail I could find online, through old acquaintances, even his college records. Ethan had always seemed blank, like a man without history. But buried under different usernames and aliases, I found traces, academic papers, psychology forum posts, archived blogs, written in a voice that was unmistakably his. All of them centered around one obsession: constructing and controlling alternate maternal realities. It started as theory. He'd written about emotional architecture, claiming that by controlling the environment around someone, what they see, what others affirm, what evidence exists, you can completely redefine their identity in the eyes of society. And then, years later, he started testing it. One forum post, from 8 years ago under the handle Behavioral Architect 79, chilled me to the bone. It said, "True power isn't in violence, it's in rewriting perception. If you can make everyone around someone believe a new version of reality, you don't need to destroy the person, you just need to make them irrelevant." That was his philosophy. He wasn't just a manipulator. He was a collector of erasures. He'd done this before, at least twice. The women he listed in his files weren't just research subjects. They were real people. One had filed a harassment report against him in 2015, but it was dismissed. The other, she'd moved states after being labeled unstable in court following a custody battle. I found fragments of her story in an online support group post. Her ex-husband's name, Ethan C., same middle initial. That's when I understood. I wasn't his first project. I was just his next iteration. The case study he was planning to publish wasn't academic fiction, it was a compilation of lives he'd ruined. He built a whole narrative around proving his theory that women could be socially and legally erased through manipulation alone. The chilling part, he'd succeeded twice, and with me, he'd gone further. Using Claire as a prop, he'd created a living replacement, a visual proof of concept. The fake photos, the rewritten records, the edited recordings, it wasn't just cruelty, it was documentation. He wasn't doing this out of love for Claire or hate for me. It wasn't even about Lily. It was about control. The thrill of watching someone lose their identity piece by piece until the world saw them the way he dictated. When I realized that, I remembered something he once said early in our marriage. We were watching a documentary about wrongful convictions, and he'd said quietly, "Truth doesn't matter if you control the evidence." At the time, I'd laughed it off as cynicism. Now it made me sick. I looked at his research notes again, cold, clinical language describing every moment of my life, my breakdowns, my reactions, my dependence triggers. He'd written, "Subject displays high compliance after sustained gaslighting. Maintain narrative consistency among witnesses." That's what my life had been, a controlled experiment. He hadn't just betrayed me, he'd used me, and all that talk about me being unfit and unstable. That was the story he'd crafted to make sure no one would ever believe me, even if I spoke the truth. But he underestimated something crucial. I had evidence he didn't know existed. The video, the notes, the metadata, all the little pieces that proved his lies. And now, knowing exactly why he did it, I knew how to destroy him. Not just legally, but publicly, by turning his own obsession into his downfall. Because if Ethan wanted to publish a case study about control, I was going to make sure the world read the real version, complete with his name, his files, his voice, and his face. And he wouldn't be able to delete that. I didn't go to the police first. I knew better. Ethan's lawyer had already poisoned every official channel. I needed to hit him in the one place he couldn't manipulate: public exposure. So I started small. I took every file from his H project folder and stripped the metadata, then recompiled the documents into a chronological archive. Screenshots, emails, photos, the delivery room footage, the timestamps, even the voice recordings he'd faked. Because I had the original unedited versions saved from my phone backups. Then I built a simple website under an anonymous domain. No commentary, no accusations, just evidence. Labeled, dated, sourced. I uploaded everything. The title of the first page: The Erased Wife. A case study by Ethan Cole. I gave it 24 hours to circulate. By the next morning, it had gone viral. Reddit, Facebook, local news. People were horrified. Reporters started contacting the hospital, the court, his firm. Within a day, his company suspended him, pending investigation. Then I sent the link to every person he'd manipulated: his lawyer, his coworkers, the judge, even Claire. That night, he showed up at my apartment. I didn't answer the door. I watched him from the window as he pounded on it, shouting my name, his face twisted in panic. Not anger, panic. Because for once, he wasn't in control of the narrative. 2 days later, the hospital launched an internal review. The nurse, Janelle, admitted to taking the envelope. She confessed everything: the bribe, the photos, the falsified notes. The doctor who'd signed my supposed mental evaluation lost his license pending investigation. The court reopened my custody case within a week. Ethan tried to claim I'd hacked him, that I'd fabricated the evidence, but every single file I'd uploaded had verifiable timestamps, emails, and logs tied directly to his own devices. When the judge saw the footage, the real footage, she stopped the playback halfway through and said quietly, "Mrs. Cole, you'll be granted immediate custody." Claire didn't even look at him during the hearing. She'd already left him by then. I heard she'd checked herself into a clinic out of state, telling friends she didn't know who she was anymore. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Ethan lost everything: his license, his career, his credibility. But the real punishment came later. The internet doesn't forget. His experiment became infamous, cited in articles, podcasts, and documentaries about coercive control and psychological abuse. His name became shorthand for manipulation: the monster who tried to erase his wife. When I got Lily back, she didn't recognize me at first. She was shy, hesitant. But when I held her, she rested her head on my shoulder, and something inside me broke open and started to heal. I kept the website up, not for revenge anymore, but for truth. For every woman who'd ever been told she was crazy when she was just being rewritten. People asked me once, during a TV interview, what I felt when I saw Ethan's mugshot on the news. I told them the truth. I didn't feel joy, I said. I felt recognition. He finally looked the way he always was, like a man with no story left to steal. Now, every year on Lily's birthday, I take one photo of us together. Just one. No filters, no editing, no framing, because I don't need to prove anything anymore. The truth already did that for me. And I keep that first photo, the real one from the hospital, locked away in a box, right next to the USB drive that started it all. The label reads, "For when she asks who her father was." Because someday, when she's old enough, I'll tell her the same thing I tell everyone who asks how I survived him. He tried to erase me, I'll say. But he forgot. Some stories fight back.